Alright guys, next up we will be talking about routing in Laravel, but before we do, let's make sure that the application is running. So inside the app folder, run php artisan serve command. And let's refresh this page. I've zoomed in a little bit. You should see a Laravel welcome page like that. Right, now let's jump to the code editor, and inside the routes folder, open this file, web.php. Now we don't need the folder view anymore. So we've got one route defined here, but essentially, let's get back to the starting point and let's talk about what routes actually are. Why do we need them? So the purpose of routing is that the routing is a process of directing the user requests, which take the form of URLs, like this one, into some specific action that can return a response. In our case, the action is this function, this PHP function, which returns a response using a Laravel helper function view, which we are not gonna cover in this video. Anyway, essentially the process is get a URL, understand it, and for the specific URL, run some action. Alright, so let's play a little with routes. Let's add another one, but before we do, let's return a different response from this main one. So you can just return a string, and this could be saying main page. Let's go ahead and test that immediately. Go back to the browser, refresh, and that was your first change to the Laravel application. Let's zoom in a bit. So for this main URL, we return the text main page. So currently, we've got one page. Now, to add another route, you will use the route class get method. You can specify another page. Let's say this would have the URL hello, for which you need to define a function and then return some different text. Maybe this can be, for now, this can be just hello. Semicolon, don't forget the semicolon here. Alright, let's see how this works. So we still got our main page, but if I type this URL /hello and hit enter, I see a different page. So now we can say that our application has two pages, the main page and the hello page, and they are being rendered when specific URLs are matched. So we've got two hello and just this /URL, and this is how you define those routes and actions that need to run after the specific URL is being matched by Laravel. Now, you need to know that inside such actions, you return responses, but also all the request processing needs to happen inside. So whenever there needs to be any interaction with the database or whatever needs to happen so you can produce the final response, it always happens within those actions. Now, you should know that the first argument to this get method is not always a static URL, it is rather a URL pattern. So, to give you an example, sometimes you might want to have a route that is more dynamic. This means that a route that accepts some parameters, and based on these parameters, you can return a different personalized response. So let me give you an example. Let's define another route by calling route get, and we want to greet someone, and we'll pass a parameter called name. So for this, let's define an action, which is a function, and this will receive a name parameter. So let's go back to the URL. So this URL will always match /grid/, but everything that comes after that will be cached by this name dynamic parameter, and this value right after the slash would be passed to this action, this function, inside this name argument. Now this is useful if, for example, you need to read something from the database, let's say a specific user profile. You can read the user data from the database and then return a personalized page. So let me give you an example here. We would return a response saying hello, and let's concatenate that with the name and also an exclamation mark. And let's try to test that. So go to the browser and say grid/ and type your name. So as you see, this works. We see the text hello Piotr. You can also try to change that to John. So this is how you add dynamic parts to your URLs. Right, so let's quickly talk about different HTTP methods. So first, what is HTTP? So when you download a website using your browser, the browser knows how to communicate with the web server. They speak the same language, and this language is called HTTP. It is a HTTP protocol. Now this protocol has different methods called verbs. This is get, post, put, and others. By default, it is using get because it is fetching a website. And as you can see, we define some sites using this get method, which corresponds with the get verb. So we've got get to read data, to fetch documents. We've got post to store new data, to send forms. So post will generally create something on the server. There is put to modify an existing thing. And then there is delete that deletes the data. So those three are called dangerous. So they potentially can do dangerous things like creating data or deleting data. Now, for that reason, it wouldn't be very easy or convenient at this point to show you examples of routes defined using those different verbs. So I will leave that for later. We'll most definitely use all of those in our first application already. So just so you know that you can define routes using HTTP verbs. I thought that you should know that at this point, but we'll be seeing examples a little later. Right, so we have the verbs out of the way. The next thing I wanted to show you with routing are the redirect routes. So let's imagine that someone has made a URL that has changed to a different one, and now we want to redirect from the old one to the new one. So I will define a route. That URL will be hello instead of hello, and from that old one we would like to redirect to this one. That's the new one. This is the old one. So this can be simply done by returning a redirect function with the new URL. So this would be hello. All right, let's test that. So first, let's go to URL that doesn't exist. We've got an error, but if I type this hello, it redirects successfully to this hello URL. Alright, so since we are using this hello URL twice already, I think it's good time to introduce the named routes, which would prevent us from using an exact URL. Instead, we'll be using a route name. But before we do, let's jump to the terminal for a while. You might open a new tab or stop the server for a second when you open a new tab, just make sure you are still in the same project directory, and now run php artisan route list. This will give you a list of all the routes currently in your application, and you might see that some of them weren't defined by you, and that's not a problem. There are some default ones or debug ones added by Laravel, for example, those. But here you can see our routes. Now, what you can also see is that some of them have names. And you can also give names to your routes, and then it would be much easier to reuse them. Anyway, this command is really useful to see what is the current list of routes defined in your Laravel app. So let's go back and define a named route. So it is as simple as calling name on this object returned by route get and just passing a name of the route. So this can be just called hello. That's just a coincidence that I've given this route the same name as the URL. It can be called anyway. Alright, now let's go back to the terminal. When I run this again, php artisan route list, now we can see this route as having the name hello. And to redirect to a named route, I call this redirect function. It returns an object, so I can call the route method and instead redirect to hello route. So if you have one of the plugins I've suggested for VS Code, this would be even suggested to you inside VS Code what are the possible routes. So as you see, it makes working with URLs much easier. So we want to redirect to hello. So this is not life-changing, but imagine that this URL changes again. Let's say to XXX. And the funny thing is that this hello route will still work, and it would redirect to the proper URL, because it's not relying on the URL exactly being hello, it is using the route name. So you might not really appreciate the route naming at this point, but believe me, once the project grows a little bigger, then you will really love using the name of the routes instead of the direct URLs. Alright, so let's continue. The next topic is how to define some fallback route, a route that will be called when no other route is matched. So currently, let's see the current state of things. So this doesn't exist. So I go to not exist URL. We see this 404 page. And I can define route fallback. So if no other route is being matched, this one will. So I can return still got somewhere. All right. So that's the fallback route. And when I refresh this, you can see that all routes that don't exist will direct you to this particular page. So we only need to define this fallback route if you want to have some generic catch-all route that will catch all URLs that don't fit any of your defined routes. Alright, so let's summarize. We have really covered a lot of ground, and we've actually covered quite a lot. That would be definitely everything that we need for our first application we are gonna build.